All right, welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast. Welcome back to Theory and Theology. On this podcast, we talk a lot about different theories of thinking, religion, spirituality, cultures. Today, I want to talk about something that I was thinking about last night. It was kind of so I wrote down the notes that I wanted to write. And this was kind of, before I went to sleep, I was just kind of like, I don't know, I guess I'd been meditating before that, like at the beach and just kind of chilling and like listening to some music and reading about music and like some musicians. And I recently was reading this article by GWAR. They have a new album out, so I was checking it out and checking out the article, and it's in Guitar World magazine, and it was kind of like a funny article. At the beginning, especially, it was kind of like humorous. Wow. Excuse me. Wow. Not sure why I'm coughing all of a sudden. Such is life. So, it's kind of about someone looking different. Like the concept of someone looking different and what makes our human mind go to, this is menacing, or this is scary, or this is unsafe, for like a shock factor. So we see this a lot in media, like for like such a long time, like as long as people were writing skits and like performing and acting and things like that. There's always been this concept of like what a villain looks like or what a bad guy looks like. Like I'm talking like even like Shakespeare and before, right? Like people would be on a stage and there'd be characters and you could kind of just tell who was what character by the way they looked, right? And I was wondering, is this a natural thing that occurs in the human mind? Because I know, like, if you put it on a deeper level of, like, ethnicity, race, gender, sexuality, like, as far as, like, expression, like, gender expression, things like that, if you put it on a more human level of just, like, how we look at each other before we even know each other, I started thinking, does this come into play? So, I hope that sets the stage for what I'm trying to say, but, it was kind of just something interesting that just like hit me all of a sudden last night, that I was just like, why do we think like this? Like why would we even think like this? Like I was looking at the pictures of GWAR and, listening to some of their music on Spotify, and how Spotify has like I don't know what you call it. Like they have like, if you're looking at the actual like phone screen when you're playing Spotify, they have, pictures or little like I guess like loops of like little video clips of like maybe the video or like some cover art or some photos or something like visual. It's not like a full music video, but it's like a looped kind of clip of some sort. I don't know if it's considered a GIF or not. It's kind of like I don't know what it's considered, but it wasn't always there, but now it's like a thing. And so there was this loop playing, like visually of, like different images of like the GWAR, band members. Like it was like zooming in on their faces and then like kind of showing them. And for people who don't know what this band looks like, they basically have costumes. Or like, there are a lot of bands who have costumes. Like Slipknot was like that. I think Wes from Limp Bizkit, at certain points, he wore like bunny suits and had these like super huge like contact lenses that made his eyes look like, his eyes were like gigantic, and it would like black out his whole eye, I think, or he didn't have like the pupil part of his eye, it was just all black. It was basically like, there are quite a few bands. I used to love Coal Chamber. I mean, still do, but I used to love Coal Chamber and Meeks from Coal Chamber, and now he's got his other band, and they kind of have like a look to them with their like kind of like bloodstained looking shirts all the time and stuff like that. Mudvayne, there are a lot of bands that would just like dress in costumes. I don't see that too much in other styles of music, in all honesty. When I think of it, like Bieber, like those kind of, like they wear like a bit of a costume, like maybe like Lil Nas X, wears like a bit of like some kind of like something you wouldn't generally wear in public. Maybe it's like a sort of a costume, but it's not usually like with a whole like facial, like a whole mask and like feet and like hands with like claws and that kind of, like, usually it's like you look more human than not. And then there are these other people that have like characters, so that kind of got me into thinking about like not necessarily about the music itself, but like how does a band, or how does an artist, or how does a scene director or whatever, how do they even know what look they're trying to get across, right? That seems like it's an innate thing, a cultural thing. And almost across cultures, even like you see a lot of cultures, even ancient cultures that have masks for like ceremonies and stuff like that, and sometimes they represent some kind of spiritual thing, or like some kind of tradition, or some animal, or something in nature. And this goes back, like, humans have been doing this forever, like putting on costumes and masks in certain situations, either for entertainment reasons or for like spiritual representation reasons, or just for fun. And you're like at a festival, like you're at Anime Expo, and you're wearing like cosplay, like whatever, like you're just kind of like dressed up in a certain way. So I haven't really thought this idea through too much, other than what I was noting down yesterday, but I was kind of curious about it, and I was like, about someone looking different, like what is that? And there is this kind of question I have about like why. So I put Gwar, makes the choice to wear costumes. They look scary, and that's their purpose. Like, they want to look a certain type of way that would be perceived not like a cuddly like Care Bear, or like Barney, or like some nice seeming thing. Like, they want to appear a certain way, but why does different equate to scary? Like, if you think about like horns, different like bumps, like kind of like how people have like those bumps on their spine, but like how alligators or crocodiles have those kind of weird like textures to their back, wrinkles, different colors. Like, humans have certain natural colors to them. Characters kind of have all kinds of weird colors, where like you wouldn't really see that in nature too much, like neon glow in the dark hair, like pink hair and stuff like that. Like claws, long nails, like scales, fins, sharp teeth, things that look like part animal or beast or some kind of a being. Like, it's like some kind of a living being that has some kind of an intention of some form. But I was just wondering, like, why in the human mind do we tend to look at certain characters with certain types of features like horns or long nails or sharp teeth and things like that, and then we go to this must be evil, or the not even evil as in like morally evil, but evil as in like this is gonna harm me or this is something I should fear, when you have no other information on it, right? You have no other information on it. You haven't interacted with the thing. You just see it and you're like, oh shoot, this is menacing, this is scary. And so just going into that kind of thought process, right? And I kind of think about it, like even like if you think about what's it called, like Chinese New Year, you know how they have the dragon and how the face of the dragon looks, and how there's like people inside of there moving in a certain way, and then like the dragon is like, it's cool, it always looks like awesome, it's super dope looking, but it's like it's really cool, but it's also like you can kind of tell based on its features, like don't mess with it. It's not something you're like when you see like a goat at a petting zoo or something and you want to go up and like hug it, or like you see a llama or something and you're like, ooh, like how cute, this little pet, you know, this little animal, or somebody's little like teacup poodle kind of animal, or like a little kitten. Like you're not really thinking of it like, oh, like this thing, I should stay away. Like when you see someone walking a dog, usually, you know, it's not uncommon to be like, oh, can I pet the dog or can I come up to it? That's not uncommon. But, you know, if you saw some weird thing that you knew wasn't a human in a costume but looked like that, kind of like almost like when you watch Star Trek and they have these other types of, I guess technically they'd be considered aliens, right? Like Klingons and stuff like that. Like they look different from like Vulcans, right? They look different from each other. Vulcans look a little more approachable than like a Klingon would. Just because of how we look at them. Like we look at them, we're like, okay, this looks more human. You know, maybe the ears are pointy and it has like a haircut that looks different, but I mean their haircuts all look the same, but it's like other than the ears and the haircuts, you know, it's kind of like, okay, you look more approachable than a Klingon that has like these features that are like maybe like, you know, like sharp features and a voice that's different, and like there's just something that tells us, right, when you look at something and you don't have any interaction with it whatsoever. You just look at it and you're like, this thing is maybe I should run. You know. And I think, you know, the easiest answer would be, you know, for human safety, you know, for human, you know, humans to be able to be safe, for humans to be able to be recognizable as humans, and to not get involved with something that's gonna rip you to shreds, right? But also, I mean, I wonder how much of this plays a role in society with like race and ethnicity and gender presentation, stuff like that. It kind of makes me curious to think like how often do we look at somebody that we don't know and just decide, and this is somebody that we need to like avoid, and what tells us that when we don't have any other information other than just visually seeing the person. Like, you know, I don't have anything against homeless people. I know not all homeless people are like what I'm going to describe, but those of us, especially if we live in the city, you know, we're not unfamiliar with, you know, the person at the bus stop that's kind of just like yelling at the sign and like acting a little erratic and might not maybe have a very pleasant scent to them, and, you know, their clothes are tattered and torn, or maybe they're like walking across the street at a crosswalk and just like yelling at the cars and like standing in the street and like acting really erratically. But the interesting thing is I've worked with people like this, Um, and usually they're not in that state of mind, but they can get into that state of mind, and type of behavior. But it is different. I've noticed too, like, it's different when they know you, when you have a good reputation with them, when you have good rapport, you can just talk. I mean, it might not be like the most logical conversation, it might not be linear, but you can tell there's a form of engagement there where they're kind of like understanding, hey, there's like a give and take in this conversation, and we're like interacting, and we're talking with one another, and we're trying to just just speak to one another and have a conversation. That's different than just like somebody just like tripping out on the street somewhere. And then also to think about all that the person goes through to get to a state where they're like that. Usually people aren't just like they come out of the womb and they're just like acting like that. Usually there's a process that goes to that occurring. But that's the main thing I would say in society, where you can see like humans that somebody would maybe almost naturally avoid. But then also it might also happen with like clothing styles. I know when I was younger, back in my young age days, it wasn't uncommon to come across like the kind of like goth looking people, like black makeup on, like it was kind of funny because I was watching Sopranos, and it was an episode where Vito, the kid Vito, he started to become his own kind of teen, and in that episode he's more he's like, you see him go from like a little kid before some episodes he's just a little kid running around with all the other kids his age and his sister and whatnot, and then there's an episode where you see him kind of a little bit older. He's like a young teen, and he's like starting to cause a little trouble, and he's with kids that are wearing like those kind of like really baggy like raver style, like Junko style jeans, and like wearing black lipstick and black eyeliner, and hair is like dyed even more black than it already is, and then like hair sticking like up in like this spiky look. And like that wasn't the most uncommon thing when I was growing up. Like you would see people like that, and I used to hang out in LA. I used to hang out at like not always at, I wasn't always at the Troubadour, but places like the Troubadour, like places in like Hollywood, like near like Koreatown, downtown, like a lot of venues where we would just go if we were going to that area of town to like see bands and stuff. And it might not even be like bands that we really knew, but like our friends' bands would be playing. Or like in the beach cities areas, we'd usually hang out there more. And then there were a lot of like punk bands, metal bands, like just kids, like most of them were like teens and college age people just playing in their bands. And then they would wear like the clothing to represent the style of music. So there were a lot of like the punk kids that dressed like very like punk rock looking, with the kind of like skinnier jeans, and like they kind of had a look to them. I wasn't so much around the grunge people, a little bit that kind of seeped in a little bit. And then the metal crew, usually they would have like, it was different. There was metal, and then there were like the goth people. So kind of people a lot of times would kind of maybe dress according to like the music that they would like a lot of times. So you would kind of have that, like the people who liked rap would dress like kind of like hip-hop style clothing with the brands that you'd see like in the hip-hop videos. And then people who were really into like metal would have like they would wear black a lot, and like band shirts, and like I don't know, freaking like Doc Martens, and you know, they had a style to them. And then the punk rockers, you know, who would like the punk music and stuff, they would wear like the punk style clothing with the patches on their jackets, and like they'd have certain hairstyles and all that. And like, but it was interesting because I grew up around a lot of people who were musicians, young musicians, church musicians, secular music musicians. I was definitely around that so often through school and everything, that it wasn't uncommon for me to see people like that and just know that like it had nothing really to do with their personality too much. So you could like be hanging out with a group of people that looked completely like, you know, they came from another planet, you know, with like their lips and their eyes, and like they'd have all these different color hair and chains hanging all over, and like these metal studs on their belts and all kinds of stuff, where you just be like, oh, they're up to no good, they're gonna cause trouble. Meanwhile, they're like the youth pastor's kids, you know, that, you know, they play only Christian music and they don't eat meat, and they're completely straight edge and don't listen to anything like other than religious music, solely religious music only. You know, you would never know that just by like looking at the way they dress. You would assume these people are doing drugs and they're up to no good and they're vandalizing property. And like, I kind of noticed that wasn't always the case. It wasn't so obvious, you know, it wasn't so like people were just obviously like trying to like cause chaos just because of the way they dressed and how they looked. So I was exposed to that a lot, and that's, you know, something that I noticed. I'm like, they're just artists, they're just expressing themselves, this is just the way they choose to dress. It isn't their personality, but it is saying something about them. They're expressing that they're into this kind of music, or they like adapt to like some form of like this kind of culture, at least some parts of it, and they want to be like visibly like seen that way. That's how they want someone to visibly see them. You know, they're not trying to look, you know, a different way, like a preppy way or whatever you want to call it. You know, they're not trying to look like a jock or look like preppy people, or like, we didn't really have those kind of labels at our schools and stuff. It was more like, did you surf or play soccer? Are you an artist or a musician? You know, that was basically all anybody cared about. Like, nobody really cared about anything else, in all honesty. Like, at the public schools, nobody was really like, it was more like, are you gonna go see this band this weekend? And like, you know, overall people weren't really like nerds, football players. Like, there wasn't really that. Like, you could be any category of person, and if you like the same kind of music as people, or if you like the same, like, depending what group you're in, it didn't really matter if you were kind of like a nerdy kind of person. Like, it was more so like the people that were kind of jerks to people, those were the people that other people didn't really like. It was more like the ones that were kind of like felt like they were better than other people because their grades were like really, really good, like those kind of people. And so that is kind of like a lot of types of people I grew up around that weren't necessarily always in the church crowd, but sometimes they were. There was some overlap with that, but you know, that's mostly where I saw that. And then like I don't really see that too much these days. Like, I don't really see like people dressed in like a lot of extreme looking clothing, but when I was younger it was a thing. People did dress like that. And you know, like, you get used to just talking to people who just look like whatever, you know. But I just wonder, like, I'm just curious to know, like, is there more to it, you know? Like, I'm really curious about that. Because it's easy to just like judge by looking at somebody. It's easy to just like look at somebody and be like, oh, you know, this or that about like whatever person, you know. Like, it's easy to kind of judge people. and assume things about them just by how they're dressed or how they look. Um, One thing that I find funny is that like I always liked band shirts ever since like high school, but I don't always buy them, but I've bought a few in kind of recent years. And our friends, I was with some friends, we were having like an event that was like we would do like game night events, but it would be like themed. So you'd like dress to the theme. So we had like an 80s night and then like a 90s night after that. So I remember I got this like this Metallica shirt and like this chain for my wallet, and like I think that's what I wore to like 90s night. It was just like my shirt, the chain, and kind of like the style I used to wear like in high school, just kind of like this is how I used to dress in the 90s kind of thing. And I found that kind of fun. But I love that shirt. I have others I think too, I don't know. But yeah, I love that shirt, and like it was kind of funny because like whenever I wear that shirt around, like people will be like, oh, I like your shirt. Like somebody on a plane said it, somebody at the beach said it. Like it was just kind of funny. I was just like, one of my other friends said it. It was just kind of funny. It was just like, oh, I like that shirt, like I like it too, but it's kind of like interesting the people who approach you about it that might not assume that you're a fan. I'm a black person. There's nothing about me that like screams metal, but I really love metal, so that's just how it is. But it's just kind of funny that like that is something about me that surprises people, because a lot of people don't assume that I like metal, and I know they don't assume that because I'm a black person. I know that's a big part of it. And it's kind of funny. Like I've been to like metal shows where it's like there's like me and maybe one other black person in the whole venue that I can spot, and then otherwise we're the only black people there. And that's kind of a fun experience too, but it's also kind of interesting. And I had a friend who was always telling me this. He was just like, how many black females are like you? It's like, I'm like, not that many. I've probably met like one black female who was kind of like me a little bit, in some ways. But yeah, I like a lot of things about me. I kind of tend to blend. I kind of cross over into a lot of different. Like there's a lot of pieces about my personality and interests that kind of cross over into other groups that it might not be so obvious about me, and that I know that about myself, and so I kind of do tend to kind of think that about other people too, that I'm like, okay, there's always going to be more underneath the surface of what is visible. There's always going to be more, I can't just go by look at somebody's appearance and just be like, oh, okay, like this is it, this is, I get what I'm seeing, like what I see is the full picture, is the full reality of it. That's not really the case, but yeah, I'm kind of yeah, I'm kind of curious to just know if there's really something deeper to that kind of human nature of just like looking on the surface, other than just like recognizing who is one of you and who is not, and recognizing who might have something in common with you or not in common with you, or who might potentially be a danger to you, or not really a threat based on how they look. Just something that I wonder. So I'm pretty curious about that. I'm just curious. I don't really have much other way to explain it other than that. I'm just really curious about, like, if there are more reasons other than like safety and like identity, like group identity, like what purpose does that really serve? Because on a deeper level, like, I feel like, yeah, it makes sense to, like, not just be approaching every old person, because you might be in, like, danger sometimes. But other than that, I'm like, I don't really know what more you can really do, you know? Other than challenge yourself, you know, I think we can all challenge ourselves when we look at somebody, that just be like, this isn't just completely, just take it at face value, especially if you don't know the person yet. It might not be the best thing to just like think that we know everything about somebody before we talk to them. But then again, you know, sometimes, you know, you can just kind of get a sense about things, but there is that fine line between like that sense that you get, this kind of that gut feeling, versus a prejudice. Those are kind of two different things. Like, I think sometimes you can pick up on an energy that you're just like, this ain't right. Like, I've met people who I was like, okay, this is gonna be fine, but there was just something about their energy that was a bit off, where I was just like, this is a little awkward. Like, this is a little odd. This person's a little like, there's something about them that was just like, maybe rubs me the wrong way, even if it was like very subtle and it wasn't like very apparent, like, and they weren't like actively doing more. But again, if on a first impression, if I'm not comfortable, then that usually makes me not really want to be interacting. And I'm not saying everyone should like force themselves to interact with people, but more like challenging at least the thought process of it. It kind of helps with I guess reintegrating back into society and meeting new people and just like mingling and stuff. But it's just kind of something that struck me as weird, because I was just like, well, how do people know what costumes to choose? Like, I know what costume I would choose if I was trying to have a certain look or a certain, you know, presentation, or like if I wanted people to perceive me in a certain way. I already know what I would put on, you know. I already know what a mask would look like, what, you know, if there were clothing, what that would look like. I already know what it would look like. But the interesting thing is, like, how would I know, you know? Like, I remember way back, when I was young, I was probably in like 8th grade or 7th grade or something, because my sister was like a baby. Well, she was young, like a toddler age, maybe 2 or younger. And we had these toys from, I don't know where. I want to say they were from like Burger King or like something, where they were like dinosaurs of some form. And you could like blow them up. They were like blow up toy animals that were dinosaurs. And I remember the T-Rex one. It was maybe like, you know, if you would stand it up, once you blew up the whole thing, it was like maybe like a foot tall. And I remember like I used to play with it. Me and my brother, I think we had like a brontosaurus, or like it was a triceratops. We had a triceratops and a T-Rex. And the way we used to play with them is we used to put their feet like on the floor, because they were blow up, so like everything was like a balloon almost. You would put their feet on the floor and then hold the tail at the back of the tail and just kind of push them forward a little bit on the carpet, and it would kind of make it look like they were kind of like moving, and their feet would kind of catch the carpet sometimes, so their feet would like move a little bit. And I remember doing that to my sister when she was younger, and like we weren't making like growling noises or anything like that. We were just like playing with the toys. Me and my brother were playing with the toys, like the toys were like fighting against each other, not like fighting, but just like interacting with each other. And then we turned them both to look at my sister, and slowly we're like walking towards her with it. And it basically probably looked like to her there were these like foot tall, like little like dinosaur things coming at her. And we had been playing with these toys for like weeks before, but some reason in that instance, when those were like approaching my little sister, she started like freaking out and being like a little frightened and afraid of them. And from that point on, we just didn't play with them, like with her in the room, because she would like freak out about these little balloon, like kind of blow up plastic toy dinosaurs. I mean, they had like sharp teeth looking and stuff like that, but they didn't growl. I think like when you squeeze them, they like squeaked or something. But like, I kind of found it actually really hilarious to me, because not that she was scared, but like it was just kind of shocking, because it's not like we just got them that day and started playing with them and then she freaked out. Like, we've been playing with them a lot, but there was something about it, I guess, with her, that when we kind of made them come towards her, she knew in her mind, this is not something that I should come towards. You know, there was something in her head that was like, this is a dangerous animal of some kind, or a dangerous thing. Like, there's something in her mind that like clicked about it. And me and my brother weren't like, we didn't really play with toys like destroying each other, like, you know, like aggressively or anything. Like, we would just like casually just like play with stuff. Like, we were never really like, you know, these are dinosaurs, so they're eating each other and destroying the city of all of our Lego toys. Like, we weren't really treating it like that. We were kind of just like, we would just play, you know, with the toys. But I found it kind of funny. I was just like, when I thought about that again, I was like, you know, she kind of knew to be afraid of this, and she was like a little kid, so I can't like ask her what the heck she was thinking about. I don't even think she remembers that, but it was just kind of interesting to think that, like, okay, someone that young knows, don't come near a dinosaur, you know, don't come near something that looks like a dinosaur. You know, you should be afraid of something that looks like a dinosaur. And she'd seen us playing with these toys before. She never was like jumpy about it or like afraid of them or anything. So it was kind of interesting to me that like she was aware that the toys existed. She never would like touch them. And there was this other statue that we used to have in the house that was about her height. And it was like a skinny it was like a little wooden statue that was carved. And it was like this skinny, like 100-year-old looking man that was just like a tribal African old man with a little loincloth and this like cane. And that's all the statue was. It was just like a single piece of like wood with this cane, or like a walking stick that the old man was carrying. And I can't remember his facial expression. It wasn't like smiling or anything, but my sister hated that thing. We would put it like near her sometimes just to like tease her, and she would always knock it over or like cry, and then she eventually broke it once. She just like beat the shit out of it and it broke. But I don't know, we didn't like tease her mercilessly about stuff, but you know, we were kids too, so it was like we knew that, like, you know, we were getting a reaction out of her, and so we just kind of put it near her, and then she just like broke it, and like we were just like, oh shit, like she just like beat it up, and I was just like, what the heck? Like, I don't know. Like, she was young, like she wasn't even like fully talking yet, like to a point where she could be like, no, get this away from me, like, no, I hate this, like, this thing is scary, like. But we would always, like, you know, we would always play, the three of us, but obviously there was, like, the age range difference, and so, like, us as older kids, of course, you know, you have a younger sibling, like, we were always kind to her, but at the same time, like, you know, just because you're afraid of, like, we knew there was no harm in it, we knew there was no harm with these, like, blow-up animals or with this little wooden statue, so to us, it was kind of like, whatever, get used to it, you know. We kind of thought, okay, maybe if you're like around it more, you know, you'll just not be afraid. Once you like touch it or whatever, you'll notice it's wooden. But nah, like, she was like, this guy's gotta go. I can't have this guy around me. But it's kind of funny, like, and I don't know, it was just kind of a hilarious situation that I came across in my memories. But I don't know, if kids that age know, then there's got to be something to it, where people know, like, okay, like, this is something to fear. But I feel like we kind of do it with each other too, and I wonder to what range. Like, I guess everyone maybe has their own personal range of, like, what would be something you would approach if you don't know it at all versus what would be something you're not going to take your chance with. And I guess that's good. But then I wonder if it's fully good. You know, it's good for safety to be cautious and, like, aware of, like, potential for, like, danger. But I wonder how much potentially, you know, myself or other people, like, how much I miss out on socially just by screening people, like, that especially if I've never spoken to them or never talked to them or anything. And it's not like my gut sense of, like, this person maybe has bad intentions or whatever. Like, if it's not really, like, from that perspective, then I kind of just wonder if it's worth it to keep that approach of the mind towards social interactions, especially since lately I'm kind of, like, in a same environment, but a new environment with new people around me, potential to meet different people, and I'm kind of stuck between this kind of, like, do I really want to meet more people? Like, I'm not trying to get, like, you know, comfortable here. My goal wasn't to stay anyway, so I'm not trying to get comfortable here, but I'm not trying to be uncomfortable and antisocial and just not interacting with others either. So that's kind of been on my mind. I don't know what I'm gonna do with all that. Like, it's it's kind of just what was on my mind last night a little bit, and I was like, yeah, I'll probably expand on this in the morning. But it's kind of hard to, like, verbalize. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, if I'm explaining it the way that I want to. But it's kind of just, like, an idea that came up that I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, just the way that people just know what to choose. Like, it started from me just recognizing that, like, this band chose what to wear. GWAR chooses what to wear to present themselves as with a certain like persona or a certain type of character where people would assume things about them. They want to make it obvious that they're not from this planet, and, you know, they look the way that they look. But it's kind of interesting. My first introduction to GWAR was in, like, a youth group. Like, it was like one Sabbath, like, thing. I don't know what it was. It was like one of those, like, Vespers Sabbath night, like, Friday evening, like, either collegiate group or a youth, like, teenage group, where we were kind of being shown videos about music and the evils of certain types of music, and they used GWAR as an example in this, like, documentary. I think it was, like, a Christian documentary that was talking about, like, you know, the youth and their souls being at risk of, like, being exposed to evil because of the evil messages that these bands, you know, promote. Now, with metal music, I do notice that there are a lot of songs about death. Even in the titles, I don't see that in a lot of different styles of music where there's, like, so many titles with the word death in them, or so many lyrics with death and destruction and that type of concept. Even if it's not necessarily them, they're not usually talking about killing people, but just the concept of death in general does come up a lot. And I know in our culture it is a taboo thing to be talking about death like that. you hardly see like series of shows that are just about death. Like people don't really gravitate towards that too much. Like I remember I love the show 6 Feet Under, but it's really hard for me to binge watch it because it makes me like really kind of like just like depressed. I'm like, dude, I can't be watching the show. It's so dark. It's about like a family who like runs a funeral home, but they kind of live in the funeral home too. And I guess they're technically, is it called a mortician, where you like prepare the bodies and stuff, and like that's technically their job, their career, and like it's a family owned business in LA somewhere. It's not a reality show. It's like one of those movie style HBO shows, series shows from like the 90s or something, or early 2000s. And I don't really see a lot of metal music really saying like evil stuff necessarily. Like they're not saying run around and kill people. They're not saying go around and like take advantage of others, rape and pillage and all. Like they're not, I don't know any music that's like that. And if it is, it's not serious. Like they're just like doing it just to like make it like funny and weird sometimes. It is really like dramatized. There are a lot of like dramatized like metal bands. Like you kind of have to know what you're listening to, and Gwar is one of those groups that's kind of like, they're kind of dramatized. They put on these monster looking costumes and they run around with their instruments and have like weird interviews that they do where they're talking about like their alien viewpoints and all this kind of stuff. I mean, they're weird. Would I say that they're like morally evil? I don't know if they're morally evil, but we are kind of taught to think that stuff like that is morally evil, to stay away from it, that it's demonic and all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, I don't know if they're demonic. They just look like monsters, because we determine what a monster looks like in our human mind. We're like, this is a monster, and then the religious types, see it and they're like, this is evil because it's a monster. And then they have the music around them and they're like, this is evil because it's talking about death. And like, I mean, I don't even remember what the documentary said, but it was about Gwar and a lot of other metal music and a lot of other bands and stuff, who they were just like, this is evil and this is wrong and this is bad and this is evil and this is wrong and this is bad. And like the profanity and just like, what do they call, like the backward masking? It was like during that time when like people were starting to talk about, like, people don't talk about that much anymore, but about like backward masking, if you like play the music backwards on a cassette tape or something, and it like says words when it's like backwards. I mean, I'm not going to say that music doesn't say that, but it's like, if you're not consciously making your music to say that, then it's not your fault, that it just, the lyrics and the music together just happen to come out in this like audio wave that just turns out to be like some weird sentence of like, I fooled the devil, or like, suicide, or like something that's just like random stuff that you would never just be like trying to approach. I mean, there are a lot of people who put purposeful subliminal messages in advertising that like, go way underneath your like conscious radar, and nobody's saying they're evil, you know what I mean? Nobody's like, oh, these people are trying to trick me into buying Lucky Charms or whatever, like, but they're gonna pick on like the music because they look a certain way. But these people who are usually picking on the music aren't really into the music. They're not fans of the music. They hate the music and they think it's evil already, and they're just trying to find like excuses for why it's evil a lot of times. I mean, I don't know, Hollywood industry, it's got its own issues, but it's just kind of, I don't know, it just kind of fascinates me. Like the whole concept of it is a little bit fascinating, that it still kind of comes up. That people don't like it. Like I remember once somebody, I told somebody I like metal. It was somebody I didn't know very well at the time. And this person was like, I don't know what they said, but they were like, you must be angry all the time or something like that. And I was just like, no, like, I don't like metal because I'm angry. I mean, that is part of it. I mean, like, I do get angry. Like, I don't feel like I'm like way more angry than like anybody else. Like, I'm not like always angry. I've definitely had periods in my life where I was just like, I'm definitely not feeling great, but it comes and goes, you know. Like, I wouldn't say I'm like an angry person necessarily, but I would say I don't really have like a lot of good outlets for anger, or a lot of good like ways. Like, I don't think any of us really have a lot of spaces where you can just like express your anger without any kind of backlash about it. Like, usually people don't want to be around other angry types of people, or anger in situations. Usually if you're angry at somebody, it's not really socially acceptable to just be like telling them. Like, you can, but it's like, you know, they're probably going to get mad at you, in all honesty. Like, usually when you say you're angry at somebody, they're usually not going to take it too well. Even though you can have a full right to be angry at anybody you're angry at, but, you know, people don't really always take it too good. Sometimes when you're, that's something that happens when you're angry. Another thing that happens when you're angry, like, one thing I like about metal music, you know, is that, you know, there's like the dance style that comes with it. Usually it's kind of a helpful kind of style of, you know, you can release a lot of anger or aggression, types of pent up feelings through that type of dancing. It's kind of more aggressive. The music it tends to be a little more on the aggressive feel side, but I mean, Mozart had plenty of music that was aggressive and really like intense sounding, and nobody's like, Mozart's evil, you know what I mean? Like, it would be like dark, like freaking Requiem Mass. I mean, like, damn, like, that's like some intense music. Like, you hear it and you're just like, wow, this, like, nobody even has to tell you it's about death, and you would listen to it and you'd be like, this is freaking about somebody's gonna die, you know, like, or somebody is dead. Like, this is about death, and there's a lot of depth to it, and it's got this like dark, like, just like you can tell, like, the energy to that song, or the whole piece of it is just like, wow, this is intense. But it's like, it's kind of funny that like nobody picks on classical music, you know. And a lot of metal honestly is very classical. It just is loud and aggressive and distorted, and they're screaming sometimes, and the lyrics aren't appealing to people who aren't really into that kind of stuff. But one thing I do like, and I'm going to talk about it in a different episode probably eventually, hopefully, is Garza podcast. He interviews a lot of metal musicians, and I do find it very fascinating how many metal musicians are able to openly talk about trauma, are able to openly talk about emotional issues, drug addiction. This is the kind of stuff that I think musicians, when you interview them, usually they're not talking about that. They're like, oh, this is the new album, and like, yeah, like, I broke up with my girlfriend. Like, people want to know like the cheesemaker type of stuff. You know, they're not asking real questions. And I think with metal, people always want to know, how does someone even get like involved in music like that as your career? Like, because there is more depth to it a lot of times, and it creates like a curiosity when you're talking to the people. And I think, you know, when you talk to the professional people who are in that music, like, just hearing their stories, there is this theme of like, you know, a lot of people grew up with some childhood tragedies happening. Maybe it's not their whole life. It may not have been like a whole life of trauma, but they do speak to, you know, I put this into my music, you know, like all the like recurring kind of like thoughts about it, or if people have nightmares about things, or if they're like traumatized over something, they're putting that energy into their music. And so yeah, it comes out aggressive, but it's like at least they're doing something with it and it's not destructive, you know. And so that's usually why I think that's why even when I was younger I gravitated towards metal, because even though I didn't really even listen to the lyrics, like I had songs that I to like more recently have read the lyrics to, and I'm just like, wow, I was like 15, 16 listening to this kind of stuff, and it's like deep, and I'm like, how did my parents even like let me listen to this? Like, because you guys know, like my folks are pretty religious, and so it's like, you know, it's kind of interesting. Like, say for example, like Metallica's Fade to Black, one of my favorite songs on earth, and like it wasn't that long ago that I sat down with those lyrics and I was just like, I never ever kind of read the lyrics to this song and noticed how it was like kind of about like suicidal thoughts. I don't know if I ever picked up on that when I was younger. I know I used to do a lot of like artwork, drawings, paintings and stuff like that, and they would always be just like really dark, you know, like. And I remember my mom later on, like maybe when I was like earlier in college, she commented about some of the artwork that she saw me with, you know, that I would like post on the fridge or whatever, and she'd be like, I would always wonder like, what is wrong with my kid, you know, like. And I was just like, okay, so like definitely, I mean, yeah, it was like a dark time. I don't know what I was figuring out, but I was definitely figuring things out. And I gravitated towards like dark artwork and like Marilyn Manson and Metallica and like all these lyrics and metal and like all this kind of stuff. And like, but I don't know if I even was like tuning into the lyrics and like thinking about what are they singing about, you know. Like I was never really like a singer too much, so it was always kind of like, you know, you sing at church because that's not evil. You can't be singing this kind of stuff, you know what I mean? Even like rap, it was kind of like, I used to like rap a lot too, but I wasn't really in an environment where people like valued hip hop at all, you know. Growing up in like a beach city, like people aren't really like hip hop fans overall. Like I wasn't in like an inner city or anything where that would be like valued. Like people always thought of it, oh, it's like those people's kind of music and like it's not part of our culture kind of thing. And so I kind of noticed that. But yeah, I remember when I was younger I did want to be a rapper, and I remember mentioning that in class, and just like everybody, including the teacher, was just like laughing, and I was just like, fuck you guys. Like kind of like that. Like I didn't like say that out loud, but that was kind of like, all right, that's the last time I mentioned that, you know what I mean? And like when I was younger I wrote a lot. Like it's kind of interesting, whenever I pop back into like writing music and stuff, I have so much like music that I wrote, and like I used to just write just like lyrics and poems and like everything, and just be doing artwork and playing guitar and like making music, and like that's mostly what I did with my free time. If I was in the house, I was doing something artistic. And you know, it's kind of interesting to look at it later on in life and be like, there's kind of more depth to a lot of this stuff, you know, musicians wearing costumes and all the kind of like musical lyrics and like the type of music and all this kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of depth to it that a lot of times we were just like, like on the surface, like take it or leave it. But yeah, I'm learning there's a lot of depth to it. So you know, I've been diving into that lately, and it's been pretty refreshing, but it's also just like almost concerning that like I exposed myself to this stuff at a very young age, and it's kind of like interesting that I gravitated towards it, and I don't think I even really like fully was grasping but there was just something about it that I was like, all this like fluffy other like church music that's just like people just saying all this stuff. It's like, let's just talk about what's actually really happening here, guys. Like, I can kind of see past all the other, I'm just like, people are suffering, the world is going negative. Like, why aren't we talking about it? We're talking about bringing people to church and like saving them from their sins or whatever. It's like, this has nothing to do with reality. But yeah, but I'm gonna stop ranting, but thanks for listening.